Hey, happy Friday, everybody. Today we're going to be talking about some IPO stocks that are actually looking pretty good. So, if you haven't seen one of these IPOs before, this is the Renaissance IPO ETF. It holds a basket of recent IPOs, and it's weighted not equally. So, depending on I'm not 100% sure, but let's say it's just market cap weighted. So I know for a long time Uber was like one of the biggest components of this. So, maybe Uber was like 10% and then all your different IPOs, are lesser and lesser from there. So you can see in 2020 we had this huge run up. 21 we pretty much went sideways, and then from, the end of 21 until now, it's more or less gone down. And, we kind of been trading sideways for the last 6 months, 7 months. This is definitely a stage one base. Um, not a bad time to be watching this, but there's not a lot of outperformance here. And if we did IPO divided by SPY, just a quick ratio, this truly shows how since February 21, if you've been trading that or owning that IPO ETF, you've been drastically underperforming the market as a whole, which is not what you want to do as an active investor. So going back to IPO, you can see, we are in a series of higher lows and higher highs, which defines an uptrend, but yet to break out of this huge base above this 36 level. So when we take a look at the individual components, not necessarily of this IPO ETF, one of the stocks we're going to look at is Duolingo, but the other two are not. Let's take a look at Vertex first. What you're seeing here on Vertex is this purple line. I like to drop an anchored view app from the IPO just to see if the average buyer is above or below their purchase price. I kind of use this as a weighting tool. If a holding that I'm taking a position in is above its IPO view app, it lets me know that there is a less chance of overhead supply being introduced in the market, since a majority of the holders, the average holder per se, the average holder is in the money on their position. And if they're in the money on their position, they're more than likely not looking to sell. So it's kind of just a way for me to gauge relative strength compared to internal relative strength of a stock. I kind of hope that makes sense. If you have some questions, you can kind of go over it in the chat or make another video. So feel free to comment below. But let's take a look at Vertex. Like I said, this is a recent IPO. This one debuted back in July of 20. And like most other IPOs, it peaked in February of 21 and went down until July of 22. This one actually looks a lot better than most. A lot of these made their bottoms in December of 22. Here it is, in December of 22, making a higher low. And then here's our higher high. So we're definitely in an uptrend. Next, we're going to look at where we are in the base. So this one really had been making a stage 2 base. I'd call it a stage 2 once we made this lower low right here. This could have been your signal that this is definitely into stage 2, no longer trading sideways into stage 1 base. And it got a little sloppy through here. If you were purely trading this, we'll call it this 23 level, you probably would have gotten introduced if you take your weekly signals intra-week, which I don't. I only look at closes. But there was some chance to get chopped up here and take a trade before it was ready. You really could have been in this one since September. There was a pretty good volume move here, so I'm not faulting you if you didn't. I really didn't notice this one until now after the recent earnings gap. And if we drop to the daily chart, you can see we had earnings here on Thursday, and we got this huge 21% move. So that's where this weekly spike is being driven from, is from that daily spike due to earnings, which is a great catalyst to watch if you're trading on these weekly charts. So long story short, let's just look at this recent base. So let's say we use this. We'll just use this general area. You can see this could be, a cup and handle. Here's your cup forming right here, and then here's our handle, really here through the end of September into now. Most of the month of October, it was a really tight trading range. We did see a lot more volume than I like. Normally, you want to see volume subside. You want to see it dry up. That is a note from the market that there's not supply changing hands. The people that have their shares are happy, and no one's looking to really sell. There's also no buying pressure, but when the market's trading sideways, that it's kind of a no-brainer that there's no buying pressure. But finally, we do get this earnings gap, and that's what made me interested in this stock. We get a huge, huge, huge volume spike. You can see this is the highest volume we've had, not ever, but dating back until this IPO. This is let's just say this first week of volume is kind of suspect. There's a lot of stuff going on. This is the highest volume we have had since this stock came to market. That's something you need to be paying attention for, and that's why I am currently long this stock. Just in all disclosure. So let's kind of just break this down. We'll draw some lines on here. So this is really your shoulder that you were watching, or your handle in that cup, and then I'll draw this cup right here for you. Oh, where's that? Here we go. So let's look at that right there. So that's the best way to kind of draw this chart pattern. As you can see, we had this cup forming right here, and then this is our super tight handle. And another thing I like to look at, this is something straight from Mark Minervini. When you're seeing these handles form on the cup, you really want to see them form above the 10-week moving average, also the 50-day moving average. And this is a perfect example of that. Lots of tight trading. We even got a doji here that signaled the bottom. And our power earnings gap on the daily is our weekly thrust, getting us through this 2472 level that leads to our breakout. So that's an IPO stock that's been doing great. That we'll look at RSI down here too. Back in April, we tried to make a new high. We did in June, but then it quickly fell apart. And you can see that there was some divergence here. This is a weekly bearish divergence. What I like to do with these divergences is extend that trend line, and a lot of the times you'll see this retest. This isn't perfect, but it's pretty damn good. We broke out right here on higher volume, but it wasn't really doing much. We pulled back a bit. The RSI retested. Price retested this resistance turn support, and then we've been trading sideways, and now we get an oversold reading on the weekly, which is or an overbought reading on the weekly. This lets you know that momentum is in favor of the bulls. So that's Vertex. I am long this one. If you're looking to place a stop, best thing to do is just place a stop below this week's bar, and that's how you're going to manage your risk. Next up, we have Duolingo. Again, this purple line is our IPO VWAP. This one IPO'd back in July of 21, and with price above purple line, we know that the average buyer is in the money. Again, let's look at this. We'd been grinding higher pretty much all summer, but RSI was failing to really confirm that. There are a couple ways to draw that line. You can draw it that way. You can draw it, this way. Either, regardless, you're seeing that there was a substantial divergence, and this one held up a lot better. Didn't really give back a whole lot of gains while it was diverging. But it did have a substantial bearish divergence on the RSI, letting you know that these price moves, these higher highs are suspect, and there's a chance that it could pull back. This one, there isn't a great base. It really was a rising base, more or less. Let's turn on this 10-week moving average. You can see this chop through, kind of a broadening pattern. You might be able to draw that, not really though. But again, this is what's most important about this chart. Massive volume. Let's check the daily chart. Power earnings gap. So this was up 21% in a single day. It's up 32% this week. That's something that you need to pay attention for. Throughout this whole base, volume was subsiding, and we see another huge breakout on volume. This is the highest weekly volume ever. Definitely something you need to be looking for. Lets you know, hey, people want this, and they're buying it in droves. Again, I'm long Duolingo as well. in full disclosure, if you're looking to place a stop, best place to put it would probably just be the low or the open of this week's bar. And then finally we have Uber. Uber went public back in May of 19. You can see we finally in May of 23 of this year we got above this IPO VWAP. Lets you know that the average participant is in the money on their shares. And this one has been stair-stepping higher. If we're just drawing some dumb trend lines on here, connecting the lows back from June of 22 to the higher low of December 22, we can see this is a clear trend line, and recently we've accelerated even. That was a great bounce right there. If we look at December 22 to April 23, and then we bounce right here. This one I'm not long, and maybe I'll look back and wish I was. We've seen a bunch of power earnings gap. If we drop to the weekly, although we didn't get a huge gap here, this is a huge move. If we look at this one, there's nothing there. This is what really kicked off that big move in Uber was there. And then this was actually a peak. But this chart just didn't look great, in my opinion, because this was a huge divergence on the RSI, and although we did overcome it, it felt kind of suspect to me, and that may just be my bias. We have a clear breakout right here. If we're drawing our dumb lines, let's draw them fat so everybody can see. If we're just drawing our dumb lines, that's a clear breakout. There's a lot of There's a lot of market memory right here. This was a big support when we had this little false breakout right here, and it acted as resistance multiple times. It acted as a resistance back in 21 of October, and now it's over as resistance. We did get a big volume thrust. The thing that just worried me was this huge RSI divergence. When you're seeing these massive moves, which Uber did have a massive move, even if you got involved right here, that's a 61% move in about 5 months, which is pretty damn good. Even if we're anchoring from, the open of this year, Uber's up over 100%, which their stocks are going up 1,000%. Like I said, I'm not in this one. I really wanted to be, but just something was telling me not to. The volume was good through here too. Maybe I should be. You could be. It's not too late if you're buying on Monday's open. That's not an issue if you're using the weekly chart as your bias. And if you're looking to get long, you just use this week's bar as your stop. So those are three IPOs that are really outperforming the market. There's a couple other ones that I'm long at the moment, but I don't really want to talk about those until we get into some bases that might be viable. If you have any questions on how I use some of these indicators, feel free to leave them in the chat, and make sure to like and subscribe. Thanks.